I'd like to introduce, giving the first keynote of this conference and exhibition, the Right Honourable Chris Grayling MP, who is Secretary of State for Transport. He will take some questions afterwards, so please hold those back until he's finished. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. It's great to be here. Great to see such numbers here today, and great to be at what is a highlight of the rail calendar. No better place to take the pulse of the industry, to find out how business is going for the supply chain, and see, I think, some really innovative new technologies around. Now, I'm not going to be able to match the technical expertise of the other speakers you'll hear from today, but what I can do is talk a bit about what we're doing and what we're going to do, our strategy for the railway, and ultimately what this is all about, which is improving services for passengers and for freight users. And of course, one of the things I do want to touch on today is what we're going to do to support an expanding rail market, to support its growth, and particularly to help you build markets overseas as well, which I see as a really important part of what government needs to do working with the industry over the coming years. Now, ever since 2010, when we set out our distinct blueprint for rail, I think there's been a consistent message from my department and indeed from my predecessors as Secretary of State that we believe in investing in growth in the railways, to focus on the customers, to remove pinch points on the network, to make sure the railways unlock the potential that the country has, for example, for new housing, and we have consistently since 2010 pressed ahead with those new investments. Now, one of the first decisions that Philip Hammond had to take 8 years ago when he became the first Secretary of State in the current government was whether to improve the civil services recommendation to cancel Crossrail. Just like it had been cancelled many times after first being proposed in 1974. It needed lots of funding, the economy was in crisis, we had a note from the outgoing Treasury Minister saying there's no money left, but actually we thought then, as we think now, that cancelling vital infrastructure projects was the wrong strategy at such a difficult time for the country. So we gave Crossrail the green light. As a result, as you see just down from here, the route is nearly completed. The first trains are being tested under central London before the official opening later this year. We pushed ahead with other schemes, major station upgrades like Birmingham New Street, the newly opened London Bridge, and now Liverpool Lime Street, which is getting a major expansion this year. Investment in infrastructure in the north, the first new north-south line in this country for well over a century, a massive programme of investment, large and small. Each year, when ministers have come back to Infrarail or to Railtex, they talk about continuing significant investment, and that's what I'm able to do today. We have recently published our rail spending plans from the period from 2019 to 2024, CP6. The total spending on infrastructure in that period will be around £48 billion. It is an unprecedented commitment. I was very pleased to see how many people welcomed, perhaps slightly surprised about that commitment, but it's there. To modernise the rail fabric, to expand capacity, and to keep the supply chain going. Alongside that, we've got billions of pounds from private companies to help renew train fleets, upgrade stations, and to transform services. And I think every bit of that money is needed to deal with the consequences of long-term underinvestment and increased demand. And you've got to remember the background. We have to support a railway that prior to privatisation had declined for 35 successive years. And yet, in the 2 decades since then, we've seen passenger journeys double. And leaving aside the issue of coal, we've also seen a big increase in freight again on our railways. So increasing the capacity of the network remains a major objective. But it's not just about providing more money. With more intensive use of the railway, a disconnect between network rail and train operators has made problems with services more difficult to sort out. It's also undermined accountability. When you're managing some of the most intensively used rail routes in the world, and that's the big challenge we've got in this country, those problems can escalate. So for me, it's been a priority also to deal with the structural issues in the way we run the railways. I think we need a more joined-up railway with integrated regional teams positioned to sort out problems fast and to work together to deliver renewals and enhancements. That's why our rail strategy goes further than before, to get private and public sectors working more closely together, to end the operational divide between track and train, and to reshape the railway around the customer. So our strategy sets out our support for the plans to reorganise Network Rail into a series of regional businesses with greater autonomy, greater responsibility for local decision making, and greater ability to form joint teams with train operators. The changes are already underway in many parts of the network, and indeed we're shaping that as we go forward with the franchising process. An alliance between Network Rail and the upcoming Southeastern franchise will take a similar approach on the Midland Main Line, and the first of a new generation of long-term regional partnerships to run the East Coast Main Line in the 2020s. The partnership between public and private organisations on the East Coast will be operated by a single management under a single brand overseen by a single leader, one railway. These are common sense changes given the pressures we've got on our railway today. But they also require a real reorganisation of the way the railway works. Joined up management, simpler, more accountable structures, and regional teams whose focus is firmly on the customer. And then there's that question of increasing capacity. It's really important that we continue to add capacity and resilience to our network. So we're now actively working on options to restore capacity lost under the Beeching and British rail cuts of the 60s and 70s. Top of that list, the flagship on that list, is reopening the railway line from Oxford to Cambridge. But we're also actively working on other potential connections that were closed to passengers decades ago, and to look to develop those that best support housing and economic growth. So, I've recently announced a project to look at potentially reopening the railway line from Skipton to Colne. And there are lines around Bristol, for example, that also very much fit the criteria we're looking at. We welcome private expertise and enterprise to help us make the most of these opportunities, and to build lines too for the first time. So, for example, we're inviting the private sector to come forward with proposals to build a new Southern Rail link to Heathrow Airport, something that's an essential part of our plans for that airport. I think this combination of game-changing big schemes like Crossrail and HS2, together with smaller local schemes around the country, is and will continue to create huge opportunities for the supply chain. And I'm very excited by the potential that some of the projects, some of the products, some of the technologies on show here this week will help us deliver that customer-focused railway. So let me give you a couple of examples of where we see technology bringing potential for the future. The rapid growth of mobile data, smartphones and tablets means that consumers today expect high-quality, reliable connectivity everywhere, and that includes on the rail network. And in fact, if you ask customers, mobile and Wi-Fi connectivity is one of their top 10 priorities, according to the 2017 Transport Focus Passenger Survey. So we need to see a dramatic improvement in onboard Wi-Fi and mobile connectivity, with the railway seizing the opportunity for further innovation once Wi-Fi is installed. Now, we're working across government, my department together with the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, to improve telecoms connections for rail passengers. But the other part of digital across the network is the potential it can play in delivering a better, safer, more reliable railway. And that's why I'm asking Network Rail to make sure that it prepares the railway for a digital future whenever it renews signalling across the country. And the technology that we're seeing this week and the technology we'll be driving across the railway will also, I think, play a big part in helping meet our environmental challenges. Railway's got to play its part in meeting those challenges. The bi-mode trains that we're introducing now across the network will play, I think, an important part in ensuring we move beyond a purely diesel age. And I think it won't be long before we see the diesel engines on bi-mode trains replaced with battery, replaced with hydrogen, which I think has enormous potential for our railways. And we will continue to work to develop those new technologies, to work alongside you to shape their potential for the future, to work towards zero carbon alternative fuel trains across the network. And then I think there's the big collective challenge we all have. We, our government, believes we need to export more. We need to win more business around the world. We need to take advantage of good British technologies to help shape infrastructure investment, not just here, but elsewhere. And my message to this industry all the way through has been, there is great potential out there. There are great opportunities out there. and we as government can play a part in helping you win that business. And we can play to some degree a leadership role in helping you win that business, and we're very actively engaged in seeking to do that. It's why I established Crossrail International, to try and build on the expertise that's been built, shaping and developing and building and constructing the Crossrail project to help deliver projects elsewhere. But we also need you to come to us. If there are real opportunities out there where government can make a difference, we won't know how to help you unless you come and tell us how we can help you. So you must regard the door of my department, the door of the Department for International Trade, as being open to you to come and say, please, we can do something here, help us. And if you ask us, we'll do everything we can to make sure that we do. Because there is a great opportunity around the world. There are projects happening everywhere you look. There are many other countries fighting for that business. I want this country to win more and more of it, and I want to work with you to do that. So I think it's a moment of great opportunity. Now, the privatisation of railways brought a great change to the way our railways had operated, been seen, and did their progression. Over the past quarter century, we've seen a transformation in the challenges facing our railway, from a long period of decline to now, frankly, a whole series of challenges brought by success. A network that's bursting at the seams, that's got increasing demand and increasing challenges. And of course, that means we've had to deliver and will continue to deliver that investment in renewing the infrastructure we've got and to regenerate and extend the infrastructure to meet the challenges of the future. So it's a time for real transformation. It's a time when we need to get the railway really operating as one joined-up industry, and it's a time we really work together to shape, I think, what we all want to see, which is a strong, high-tech, effective, efficient, safe, modern railway, as well as a thriving industry that we can take around the world as a great British success story. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I wish you all the best for a very successful event, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come and join us here today. And I hope you enjoy your tour of the show afterwards. So, as we said, we have a time for a few questions. There'll be the famous roving microphone. So, if you could tell us who you are and which company you represent, and there's a microphone there for you.
Thank you. Paul Jenkins, Independent Engineering Consultant. Great to hear of the investment plans, and great to hear of your acknowledgement that we need some unified management. And of course, this investment allows the train operating companies to extract profit from the network. Noting that something like 72% of British trains are run by foreign states, when are you going to take back control and allow the British state to run trains?
Well, I'm less concerned about who runs the railway than that the railway runs well. We already have a very substantial part of the railway run by the British State. Network Rail is a publicly owned, publicly led organisation. We also have a number of very good transport companies in this country. We have a number of good international companies. And to my mind, what matters is what works. And if you look at the evidence of the last 25 years, the railways have gone from being a story of decline, a story of lost routes, of lost services. When I was a teenager, growing up going to school on the Chiltern Line, it was a time when British Rail was contemplating closing it all together and turning it into a coach route, with Marylebone Station as a coach station, and the double track from Bicester to Banbury was ripped up and turned into a single track. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine we would end up with express services from Marylebone to Birmingham and beyond and into the Black Country. So we've seen some real transformations in the last 25 years. I wouldn't want to lose the innovation that has delivered those transformations. And I think what we've got now is actually a good partnership between public and private sectors. And I think this country is at its strongest when it has public and private sectors working together. And long may that continue.
Thank you very much. We have another question from the back. I'm going to walk down to you.
Hello, Chris. David Redwell. We met in Bristol on the Parkway opening. I suppose, amongst all the engineers here today, as a disabled person, as you know, my views on getting the railway moved forward on disability and equality, and I think the government's doing a lot of that. I suppose the other question is access for all funding. I suppose I would put this through. I'd rather not just see it as access for all, but I suppose in design guides from Network Rail and to the engineers, that as we start to go through most of the stations, it becomes a norm, just like it is on the highways or the bus stations that we have to plan the Equalities Act into the railways. I mean, I welcome the work. I am very worried, though, and I know it's beyond your control, but I did read something alarming about the Welsh Government suggesting that they didn't want to do the TRISMPI on the units in the valleys, and I think locking out toilets is a disgrace, and I hope that you will have a word with the Welsh Government, remind them they need to comply with the law. But I think the issue is around more of the same, but just putting it into the culture of the rail industry, really.
Absolutely.
And I welcome the Bristol proposal.
Yeah, the Welsh Government doesn't always listen to me, I'm afraid. But look, I mean, I'm absolutely with you that accessibility shouldn't be an add-on, it should be an absolute norm. The challenge, of course, that we have is that when our rail infrastructure was developed, accessibility was something nobody ever thought about. And step by step we are working to change that, to adapt buildings that were put in place 100, 150, 200 years ago into a form that is fit for the modern world. It's inconceivable we would build anything new now without accessibility being built in as a routine. But we will have, it's worth saying for CP6, there will be a further accessibility fund. There will be a further fund for freight improvements. As you know, there is a fund for enhancements as well. We will do everything we can to make sure that we deliver accessibility as rapidly as we can, in the context that it's not straightforward given the nature of the original infrastructure, but there will be, as there has been in the past control period, there will be a further block of money for accessibility in the next one.
Thank you. I think what that demonstrates is, I mean, we in the rail industry tend to put our blinkers on and think about the rail industry. You, of course, have to look at transport as a whole, not just rail. But there are also elements where you have to liaise with other departments and all work together to get the result. And I think that question was a good example
Absolutely.
of that. So thank you for that. We have another question in the corner.
Mr. Grayling, Josh Spiro, Financial Times. Hi. What do you mentioned more local control. Can you outline a bit more detail about that and what it's actually going to mean for franchises as well?
Well, this is all about devolution within Network Rail. I want Network Rail to go through the classic process of moving from being a pyramid organisation to being an inverted pyramid organisation of a series of route businesses that have operational control over much of what happens on that route. I'm not necessarily suggesting the routes have got the capability to do giant enhancements, but I think that the majority of decision making about renewals, for example, about the operation of the railway should be done at a route level. It should be done hand in glove with the train operator or train operators, and that should give us the vehicle to have a much more joined up railway. You don't have to merge organisations to have a joined up railway. What you have to have is teams that work as one. I mean, when Terminal 5 was built at Heathrow Airport, it was one team of people who came from multiple different organisations. It is about people working together as a team, and if you have a local accountability for running the trains and you have local accountability for managing the route, you have the potential to create, and I want to see us create, a much more joined up railway on a day-to-day basis. And that may mean dealing with problems when they arise, how you recover the network when something goes wrong. It may mean planning possessions, it may mean planning enhancements, it may mean planning smaller enhancements, it may mean planning renewals, but it's joined up decision making, focused on the customer, focused on the route, at a more localised level and not just done at head office.
Thank you. Another question here.
Yeah, Chris Jackson, Railway Gazette. You recently published the enhancements pipeline process. One of the things that we hear from the supply chain is that they want visibility of what's coming up in order to plan for investment in skills and facilities. Do we know when the actual project in that pipeline will be available and open for people to see what's coming?
Well, so I mean, things I can say now are on their way. So the biggest project in CP6 will be the TransPennine upgrade. It's a £2.9 billion project. The aim is for the work to start in the spring of next year. The first phase, or the next phase I should say, of East-West Rail, my expectation is that the enabling works on that will start in the late summer. The East-West Rail team are currently working through a delivery plan to get that railway up and running as quickly as possible. This is a real test for me about trying to demonstrate that we can do things faster and do things better. I want to see that railway open much sooner than was originally expected. So those two projects are both very imminent. The other project I've said is very clearly going to be a part of CP6 is Ely North Junction. where we're going to need a rolling programme of improvements to increase capacity in that part of the world. What I'm not going to do is just publish a list of every project that's going to happen in CP6. I don't think that's particularly helped in CP5, but to be frank, with East-West Rail, TransPennine upgrade, HS2 all happening in the next year or two, and visibility of a £20 billion renewal programme right across the network, I think there's plenty for the industry to get its teeth into.
Good, thank you very much. Next question over here.
Hi, Mark Cookham from the Sunday Times. Season ticket sales have fallen by around 8% in a year. I just wondered if you could give your thoughts on how the franchising model will cope with much lower than expected passenger revenues, and whether you're concerned that more franchises have aggressively overbid in the way that East Coast did.
So we obviously watch this very carefully, and what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years is to put in place a clearer risk-sharing mechanism into franchise agreements. So if you look at Southwestern, for example, we didn't actually accept the highest bid on that franchise. There is a changed pattern of travel at the moment. It's not actually, I think, a question of fewer journeys on the railways, though there will always be ups and downs from quarter to quarter. We are seeing some changed patterns of usage. I think the season ticket issue is that more people are actually choosing to work at home 1 day a week, and so therefore are not always buying a full season ticket. We expect growth to carry on in demand. We've got a rising population, self-evidently. As population grows, I think more people are going to be using the public transport system. But we are watching very carefully to make sure that we identify any problems in advance and can deal with them. The situation on East Coast is very unfortunate. It's actually performing pretty well as a railway, 92% customer satisfaction. The bid was wrong. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. We've got to make sure that we don't do that again.
Eric Willen, private signalling consultant. Can I ask a question? Your new 700 series trains, which I've had a few journeys on lately, why passenger comfort with the ironing board seats seem to have been very low on the specification? I've only done short journeys on one of these trains, but I wouldn't like to do a long journey. They're more designed for metro use than from King's Cross to Peterborough.
Well, of course, I mean, the key purpose of these trains, they're predominantly going to be commuter trains, and they've been designed to provide as much extra capacity as possible. My experience is seats are always a bit harder when they start off, when they do soften, but it's a point we've taken note of. I don't want people to have uncomfortable journeys. At the same time, we actually want trains that deliver, are durable and the rest of it, and finding the right balance. To be honest, I think sometimes my department micromanages a bit too much in a number of areas, and I think that the train manufacturers and indeed the train owners, the Roscoes, will be taking careful note of what's being said about these trains when they come to future procurements.
Hi, Rory Dickinson from Network Rail Rolling Stock. It's become apparent really recently that diesel particulates from midlife diesel fleets are becoming quite a problem, either in stations where we either have some extraction and can take it outside, or stations where we don't have extraction because there's never been extraction. From a systems approach, what can the DFT do, and what can the Secretary of State do to make sure that we can actually improve this? Because there's things that you can do to rolling stock to improve the emissions, but it's at Network Rail, we have absolutely no power over them, and most people don't have that much power over them, but it's something that we need to tackle as a systems approach, such as franchise renewals and putting on obligations to maybe clean them up to some degree. What can you see yourself doing?
So, I mean, I think it's something actually that Joe Johnson, as new Rail Minister, is looking quite carefully at the moment, the whole issue of environmental impact of the railways. And we're going to see some quite big changes, I think, over the next 2 years, because a lot of the older diesel fleet is being scrapped. The old Pacer trains, the old two-coach trains in the north are being substantially replaced. But I think it's also about driving forward with new technologies. I'm a great believer in the flexibility of bimodes. I want to see the first hydrogen trains on our network in the not-too-distant future. We will see battery electric hybrids. We're seeing the first battery electric hybrids on the tram system in Birmingham, for example. And the flexibility that bimode trains enable you to do is to electrify in and around a city centre without necessarily electrifying the whole route, and deal with some of the emission problems within our urban areas. So I think it's about creating a technologically innovative and a technologically flexible railway. Right now, if you said to me, what's the solution? I think it is using electrification in places that makes a difference and concentrating the money we've got on doing that and tackling some of those problems in urban areas, and using the flexibility of bimodes to also take those same trains to parts of the network where it could not possibly be cost effective to electrify.
Minister, good morning. My name is Dave Franklin from Sumitomo Electric. Can you give us the latest updates and what you can share with us regarding Crossrail 2, please?
So at the moment, Crossrail 2 is going through the same process that Crossrail 1 did, effectively of having independent verification of cost, structure of project and how it's going to be paid for. It's being done by the man who heads Thames Tideway. The Mayor and I have commissioned that jointly, and we are looking to get his report back later in the year. Crossrail 2 is a project that is going to have to happen in some shape or form. London is going to need extra capacity. It's a project I've said very clearly needs to march in lockstep with the rolling out of Northern Powerhouse Rail as well, because we need a higher quality rail system in the north. But I expect us to be able to take things forward later this year.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question.
Mark Balaam from the West London Line Group. Congratulations for the progress so far on HS2. Delighted it's coming to London. But could you please have a look again at the arrangements for Old Oak Common to ensure they're optimised for the southern half of the country as much as the northern half in terms of access to HS2, and also looking to plan for the future of expansion across the southeast and possible links to HS1 on the continent. And finally, could you please take a lead of the rail industry in terms of the Grenfell disaster to look at the options for a station on the West London line at Westway Circus to meet not only the regeneration requirements there, but also existing local and developing transport requirements. Thank you very much.
So on that latter point, that one really is going to be one for the Mayor. One of the things I've said, I'm in discussions with the Mayor about integrating the West London line into the Overground, which I think is a logical thing to do. We're in discussions about whether that should happen. If it does, and of course the Overground operates up that route already, it's probably that one is a project for the Mayor. Old Oak Common I see as a really important hub for the future. We've got big plans for Old Oak Common. We've obviously already got HS2 and Crossrail going through there. As we develop and open the Southern Rail access to Heathrow in the next decade, which I think is very important, that will bring trains from the south into Heathrow and on to Old Oak Common. The potential to bring trains from the South Western network through Heathrow into Paddington will clearly be there. We're also making provision for a Chiltern Line station at Old Oak Common, which would provide a connection up to Aylesbury and then beyond to Milton Keynes. That's something that won't be done in CP6, though we'll make provision for it, but it's a project that I would want to see personally. I may not be Secretary of State by then, but I would want to see in CP7 or CP8 Network Rail take forward a project to upgrade the Chiltern Line into Old Oak Common and to complete that station. So I think Old Oak Common is going to be a really important hub. It'll have southern connections, it'll have connections up into the Chiltern area as well as to the west, to the east, and through to the Midlands and the north with HS2. So the potential there is really exciting.
Good, thank you very much indeed. I think it's a great opportunity for people to ask questions directly of the Secretary of State. So I'd like to thank Chris Grayling for doing that. You mentioned one of your predecessors in your talk, Philip Hammond. He actually also opened this show a few years ago while he was Secretary of State. So thank you for that link. This is part of an ongoing programme of talks and keynote speeches during the course of the show, so please come back and see us. Meantime, thank you for attending, and thank you very much indeed, Chris Grayling.